What's up, everybody? We've got two games to discuss while we look at the NFL Divisional playoff round. On the NFC side of things, we're going to start off with the Bears game as they host the Rams. Both teams down to the wire in the wild card round. The Rams barely surviving that game against the Panthers, and the Bears racing an 18-point deficit and finding a way to beat the Packers in the final 2 minutes of that game at home. Should be another cold, windy game in Chicago, which you would think would benefit the Bears here, as Stafford and the rest of that Rams team are used to playing in warmer weather and in dome environments. And even so, the Rams still favored by 4.5 points here. And I think that 4.5 points is justified, even though the Rams aren't playing their best football lately. I really like the matchup they have with the Bears this week. Really, the way that their offense stacks up against the Bears defense. Looking at just a few different metrics in the passing game, we'll start out. The Bears, their secondary is already not fantastic, especially with dealing with some injuries that they have been outside of forcing the occasional turnover. But the Bears are letting up the fifth most deep passing yards in the NFL right now. And you know that guys like Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams and that Matt Stafford, Sean McVay offense are going to pick up big chunks down the field because they're so dangerous in doing so. You know, another thing that I like the Rams and point to is in the passing game is their ability to pass protect for Matt Stafford paired up with the Bears' inability to really generate a pass rush. If you've been watching, you've been seeing this with Montez Sweat, their big money pass rusher, not really doing much in the passing game, and Booker really being the de facto pass rusher right now. But even between those two guys, the Bears are bottom 5 in the league in generating pressure on the quarterback. And Stafford has been the best QB statistically this season when he's throwing from a clean pocket. So giving Matt Stafford all day to throw in combination with the Bears letting up the fifth most deep passing yards in the NFL makes me really wary that Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams are going to feast all day long here. One other piece is this Bears run defense isn't all that great either. Bottom half in the league in this run defense. While the Rams' offensive line has been terrific this year, they have the third best rushing yards before contact, really showing what their offensive line is able to do in run block situations. And coupled with that, the Bears are allowing the fourth highest yards per rushing attempt in the NFL. You know, all of that is to say, I think you're going to see both Blake Corum and Kyren Williams being able to rush the ball with relative ease against this defense before even generating contact from this defense. So I think the Rams, with really good running backs that I just mentioned in that duo and really good wide receivers, along with a lot of time in the pocket for Matt Stafford this game, I think it could be a long day for this Bears defense. Now, that's nothing new for the Chicago Bears, as they're, one, used to playing from behind and used to having to put up points to dig their way out of football games. Wouldn't be shocked if you see the Bears fight tooth and nail this game and have this outcome come down to the final possession, as we've seen so many comeback games for the Bears this season. You know, Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson are really orchestrating this offense to perfection. Between Kyle Monangai and DeAndre Swift, the running back duo, not quite as good as what they've got there in LA, but a very formidable rushing unit behind a solid run blocking interior offensive line. Colston Loveland really showing up as one of the de facto go-to pass catchers, even as a tight end within this offense. You saw now that DJ Moore, Romo Dunze, and Luther Burden are all healthy at the same time, this offense has some really, really big firepower at their disposal. No, by both, PFF, DVOA, many statistical measures, you're seeing this Rams defense ranked really highly amongst the NFL in their ranks. They do a little bit better job of covering tight ends than wide receivers, so I would see Colston Loveland's production kind of drop down from what you saw in the wild card game, but I would expect to see that production picked up and really schemed for by Ben Johnson to get that production out to his wide receivers like Rome, who's coming back from some injuries, Luther Burden, who's a big play threat every time he steps on the field, and DJ Moore, who's been old reliable for this team for the last few seasons. Another big place, though, that the Rams kind of outflank the Bears here is that they've got the fourth highest pressure rate in the NFL. And they really do so with sending four guys with, led by Jared Verse, rookie of the year last year, Byron Young at defense as well on the other end of that D line. Really able to generate a lot of pressure. Caleb Williams, while he's great throwing on the run, he is a little bit skittish in quick to abort the pocket, in my opinion, when it starts to collapse. And I think you're going to see that come into effect too, because as good as Caleb is at scrambling, in doing so, he inherently takes away half that field. So I think you're getting the Rams team almost at a discount here because they've looked so poor these last few games. Certainly not playing their best football, and maybe they won't be playing their best football, but I think there's plenty of opportunity and great matchups they have this game. The wild cards here will be the weather and how this team will play in the near 0-degree temperature that will be in Chicago this weekend. And then the Bears seemingly always having a feather up their cap and an ace up their sleeve in the second half. You never know what's going to happen with Ben Johnson, this team that is truly a second half, fourth quarter team. I certainly love the Rams to win the first half by all of those metrics I just mentioned. I like them to win this game too. I like the over. Even in the cold weather, it should be a high passing affair. But I'm going to take the Rams to win this game and to cover it, I think to the tune of 31-26. Just a reminder, if you don't mind, please like the video. It means a lot to me. Subscribe to this channel so that you don't miss any of the other NFL content we have. AFC video coming out soon. And comment who you're taking and what you're thinking about these NFC games this week. Other matchup featuring two NFC West Division rivals playing for the third time this season. You've got the Niners on the road taking on the 1 seed Seattle Seahawks, favored by 6.5 points at home. You know, the last two times these two teams played, they split the series, but when San Francisco won, that was week 1, and they were a much different team, much more maligned with injuries. On the defense side of the football since then, and the newest injury with George Kittle at tight end, who'll be out for the season, really a deep blow for this Niners team, as he's such a producer in both the passing game and the running game. The other time these two teams played was just the final week of the regular season in Week 18, with the Seahawks winning 13-3 in a really defensive battle, and the Seahawks flexing their grand defensive unit and limiting this really great Niners offense to only 3 points. You know, you look at, I reference the PFF stats a lot. You put that in tandem with the DVR rankings. Both these teams are rank in the top 10 offensive units in the league. San Fran actually being the second best offensive unit in the league, behind only the Rams. Seattle having the 10th most efficient offense in the league. But the real difference is defense, where Seattle boasts the #1 defense, and San Francisco is a bottom 5 defensive unit here. That's what you saw really show up in one of the last few games for the Seahawks, but really in this matchup here in Week 18, where the Seahawks stymieing this prolific San Fran offense at only 3 points. Look at the Niners defense. I've talked about the injuries. You know, losing Fred Warner, Nick Bosa is always going to help the opposing offenses and really hurt Robert Saleh in this defense. But even without those big names, these fill-ins in this ragtag defensive unit is playing one with a lot of heart and a lot to prove, and that's certainly picked up the defensive performance as this season's went on under Robert Saleh, one of the best D coordinators in the league. But I think they face some tough weaknesses against the Seattle offense, where this defense is giving much more production to opposing slot receivers and tight ends. That's compared to the traditional wideout position. Think DK Metcalf, especially when he was on Seattle. This passing attack for Seattle is predominantly, admittedly, Jackson Smith-Njigba, but who does most of his damage from the slot receiver position. And if it wasn't hard enough to guard that guy, you're going up against the Niners defense that has struggled historically this season covering that slot position. Ultimately, I think whenever you play a team 3 times in a given season, especially with as great of coaches that there are on both sides of the football for each of these teams, you start to tend to be a real dogfight of a game, similar to what happened in Week 18, and I think that always lends itself to the under. I don't think you're going to see a lot of points here. I think what you saw, teams have success in these first 2 matchups. Those advantages will get schemed away either by Mike McDonald and his great defense, or Kyle Shanahan and his great offensive play calling. Both are going to be going back and forth and neutralizing each other's net adjustments. I think what's going to come down in this game is star power in terms of Christian McCaffrey at running back receiver. They're doing both for this team, for the 49ers, Jackson Smith-Njigba being the big playmaker there for Seattle, but also the quarterbacks, Brock Purdy throwing 2 picks in that Eagles game, will not be able to get away with that in this game against a much more formidable secondary. And then Sam Darnold, who we've seen him in the playoffs, especially under big pressure in the past. Granted, one game last season, but when the opposing team put the pressure on him, he kind of crumbled in the playoffs last season. So going to be on the top two guys on each of these offenses, I think, as I think both defenses come to show up with great play callers for both these teams out of the NFC West. I think it lends itself to a really low-scoring game. I think it lends itself then inherently to the Niners covering in this tight game, but ultimately I think Seattle, for the reasons I described, really their defense compared to the huge relative advantage of the 49ers defense will take the cake for Seattle at home here. I like Seattle to win this game to the tune of like 16-13, a real low one, with the Niners understanding how to scheme away Jackson Smith and Jigba the best they can. But even then, this Sam Darnold-led offense has found ways to put up points all season long when it mattered, leaning on a really solid defense to not have to put up much offense production. And so that's why I think Seattle can find a way to win this game, even by putting up the 16 points, as they limit San Fran to under 20 points for the third time as they face this season. That is the NFC preview for this week in the divisional round. We'll get back to you shortly here, and keep an eye out for an AFC video real soon here as the Texans and Steelers wind up on Monday Night Football. Thanks, guys.